With the recent release of Oblivion Remastered, there's a lot of discussion about it as a singular project, ranging from how it works to why it's convenient or unnecessary, and all the changes it makes, including old bugs it fixes and new bugs it introduces, funnily enough. I've been playing Oblivion Remastered while I wait for my physical copy of Clair Obscur to come in the mail, and I've been quite pleased with the experience. In fact, the game released at the perfect time, because in the weeks leading up to its surprise shadow drop, I had actually been considering going back and replaying the original Oblivion, because I hadn't touched it in a long time. But then I saw the rumors of an imminent release of a remake, so I decided to hold off. I thought it would be interesting to re-experience the first Bethesda RPG I played from beginning to end in a shiny new form. A part of me always preferred Oblivion over Skyrim, partly out of nostalgia, yes, but also because I enjoy the location of Cyrodiil more than Skyrim, and I typically prefer the quests in the former as well. I never had much of an urge to go back to Skyrim after completing it, but the urge to go back to Oblivion popped up somewhat regularly in the years since I played it. Now, this video is not meant to be a review of Oblivion Remastered, and I haven't even finished playing it yet, but since I might not talk about it again, I'll sum up my impressions on it. Feel free to skip this part using the chapter function. Basically, I really like it. It has the spirit of the Oblivion I played back in, I think, 2007, but the updated visuals make the game look today like how I saw it back then. The combat feels a tiny bit better thanks to more visual feedback, and leveling has been changed now, so you're not min-maxing skills anymore, but instead allocating 12 points directly into 3 attributes every level. Now, of course, there still is a wrong way to play by putting those points in non-combat skills, which leads to enemies outscaling you, but it's still not as bad as it was in the original game. And of course, the game also retains the majority of the iconic voice acting, while also adding new performances on top of them to create more voice diversity, especially between races. The game also includes the expansions, Knights of the Nine and Shivering Isles, which almost doubles the amount of content. And in typical Bethesda game fashion, the game also does not perform perfectly. There is a ton of frame rate dips, hitching, silly NPC behaviors, and a metric fuckload of pop-in. I played the original game on the PlayStation 3, so I decided to play the remaster on PS5. And while it is a bit more stable overall, it is still pretty damn janky. And part of me kinda likes it that way. Nostalgia is a hell of a drug. The only real criticism to speak of at the moment is the colors of the world are a bit dulled, but if you're playing on PC, there's already numerous reshades available. Oblivion Remastered uses the 2-engine pairing system that more remakes are using, like Demon's Souls and I think Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Basically, this method of remastering involves running the original game logic in its own engine and then using the new game engine to essentially paste the new higher fidelity assets over that game logic. This means the gameplay and physics are more or less the same, but the visuals are dramatically overhauled. It's a pretty clever way of remastering a game without fully remaking every aspect of it, like Capcom does with Resident Evil. Those are full remakes. Everything is brand new. It is a little bit annoying though because it muddies the definitions and boundaries that separate remaster and remake. And now no one knows what to call it, even though both words are accurate in different ways. The visual assets are remade, yes, but the game logic is mostly the exact same. It's a bit confusing and goes against the very human need to categorize and classify things. Now, with that all said and done though, I've seen some discussion about Oblivion Remastered since its release, especially from people who never really understood the appeal of the RPGs made by Bethesda Game Studios, and don't understand why people are so excited for a remaster that doesn't really change that much. Now personally, while I do have some pleasant, nostalgic memories of some of their games, I am not a die-hard Bethesda lover. I did not care much for Fallout 4, and I really did not care for Starfield. I have an hour-long review showing as much. So from my perspective, Bethesda hasn't really made a decent game in 14 years. But I do understand why Bethesda games are so popular and why a new one is always in high demand, even if they have the same shortcomings as the last one. And part of the reason is the fact that almost no other studio is making a game that hits the exact same notes as a Bethesda RPG, which results in fans being very underserved. Now, I know some of you might immediately respond with, "Oh, that's nonsense. There's a ton of action RPGs out there with better combat and better questing and better writing." I know all of that, and I agree with you, but that still misses the point. None of the other games you're probably thinking of evoke the exact same feelings as a Bethesda RPG. The appeal of these games is more specific than you might think. This finally leads us to the question, what is a Bethesda RPG? Now obviously the literal answer is just an RPG made by Bethesda Game Studios, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is, if Bethesda RPG were an actual genre, then what are the qualifications a game must have in order to be securely categorized as one, even if it's not made by Bethesda? I'm no stranger to trying to define genres, so let's see if we can do it here too. It is possible for another studio to make a Bethesda RPG. In fact, some have done it already, or at the very least, got really, really close. I know some people think that calling a game a Bethesda RPG is an insult because it is a label associated with an experience that's a mile wide yet an inch deep, but very few other studios are capable of making, or at least willing to make, a similar type of game. So let's start off by quickly examining the actual RPGs made by Bethesda. What do they aim for, just on a conceptual level? What is the main goal of every Elder Scrolls game, Fallout 3 and 4, and New Vegas, even though it was made by Obsidian, and Starfield? What is the one aspect of their experiences that they prioritize over everything else? Immersion. That's the singular goal of every Bethesda RPG, to completely and utterly immerse you in the world. But how do they accomplish that? Bethesda RPGs are not unique in wanting to immerse the player, so what sets them apart from other games? This is where things get more specific, and where other games fall short or simply deviate in delivering the immersion on the same level. First is character creation, with a variety of customization options and ways to play. Obviously, immersion helps if you're able to make a character you actually want to represent you. A lot of people tend to just make themselves, but others enjoy making characters who aren't like themselves at all, and Elder Scrolls, and fantasy games in general, are especially conducive to that thanks to having multiple races with their own unique traits. Second is a first-person perspective. I know some people might disagree with this, but a first-person view is often used by game developers to help bolster a sense of immersion. It's why Capcom decided to bring Resident Evil into first person with RE7. They wanted to go back to focusing on horror, so they went all in on that by forcing a new, more immersive perspective that has the player get face to face with enemies and the environment. Yes, Bethesda games also typically offer a third-person perspective too, but it's not really great. It's very clear they made the game with the first-person camera in mind. And some first-person RPGs don't even offer the choice at all, like Cyberpunk 2077. The point of first-person in these RPGs is to completely put you in the role of the character you made. The third quality is an open world with an unrestricted story structure. I think we all know that the best part of starting a new Bethesda RPG is just wandering around. I've already seen a ton of people do just that with Oblivion Remastered. Players old and new were talking about how they immediately tossed aside the main questline, started wandering aimlessly, diving into every cave or dungeon they found. You're able to totally ignore the critical path and do pretty much anything you want. You can steal, kill, explore, do faction quests, make spells, whatever. It's very rare for a Bethesda RPG to railroad you, and if they do, it's typically for a very brief amount of time. You're almost never prevented from going off and doing your own thing between story quests. It's a very liberating level of freedom that helps with the immersion. Fourth is the option to quite literally live in the game world. Because Bethesda RPGs focus so much on creating a world that feels inhabited and alive with normal people, of course they want you to feel like a normal inhabitant as well. The dream that Bethesda RPGs offer is not just throwing you into an adventure you have to do robotically with no other option, but to actually be part of a larger universe. You don't just go on your grand journey and never look back. You're also doing random tasks given to you by strangers, you're taking up odd jobs to make some coin, and you're actually buying a house and treating it like a home, a place you return to regularly, even if it's just for a quick nap or to store your loot. By literally living in the game world through the character you created, you can immerse yourself to a pretty substantial degree. And Bethesda has been trying to emphasize this more and more with each game. In the Hearthfire expansion for Skyrim, you're able to build your own home from scratch, adopt children, and hire staff to tend to various chores on your property. In Fallout 4, this is expanded even further with base building, and then it's expanded even more in Starfield with the added bonus of ship building too. There's even been some rumors that The Elder Scrolls VI may have naval battles with shipbuilding inspired by Starfield's, but obviously with normal sailing ships and not spaceships. It is just a rumor, but considering that the game is likely to be set in Hammerfell, which has a lot of seafaring activity, it could make sense. By offering numerous ways to leave your mark on the actual world by building things, the opportunities for immersion increase even more. Those are the four main qualities of a Bethesda RPG: character creation, first-person perspective, open-world format, and the ability to literally live in the world like a normal inhabitant. Now, I would say there's 3 other minor qualities that help, but probably aren't as important. There is room to argue that this first one is a necessity though, and it is real-time action combat. I know this might sound pedantic, but it is arguably easier to immerse yourself in a game that wants you to treat your experience like a second life when people fighting each other aren't conveniently taking turns. Action combat helps with the spontaneity and tension you could reasonably expect from a hostile world like in Elder Scrolls or Fallout. And the thought of turn-based first-person combat is a little strange outside the context of traditional dungeon crawlers. The second minor quality is production value. Now, I'm not talking about a big budget. I would not suggest that an indie studio is incapable of making a good Bethesda RPG in this day and age, especially when indie studios can get fairly big and resourceful while still technically being indie. What I'm talking about is scope and environmental design, and maybe even lore, working together to make the average player step out into the open world for the first time, look at the horizon, and go, holy shit. It's that impression that really hammers home how big the world is and how much there is to see and do. And the third quality is broad mod support. The only reason this isn't a major quality is because a Bethesda RPG can still be a Bethesda RPG without mods, as shown by the fact that all the existing ones have console versions too. But the PC versions typically have huge, expansive mod support that allows players to make gigantic changes to the game, so they can create their own additional opportunities for immersion. So now that we've laid down the foundations for what a Bethesda RPG is, what are some non-Bethesda games that fit the definition, or perhaps come reasonably close? Well, I mentioned Cyberpunk 2077 a while ago, and I would say that it actually qualifies. You can create a character, you have plenty of build options, it's solely in first person, it's an open world game, and you can live in various different apartments and occupy yourself with a ton of side tasks while totally ignoring the main storyline. And the production value of the game is utterly insane. Night City is one of the most detailed and immersive settings in the RPG space today. It's not a coincidence that people went to bat for the game even while it was still in a broken and lackluster state years ago. It was the first single-player Bethesda RPG since 2015's Fallout 4. It was the only game that scratched those itches. Thankfully though, the 2.0 update and Phantom Liberty expansion have elevated the game to incredible new heights. Not only is Cyberpunk 2077 a Bethesda RPG, I would even say it's the best one. The only thing that Cyberpunk does worse than actual RPGs from Bethesda is giving NPCs their own unique schedules. Every NPC walking around in Oblivion and Skyrim has a home you can follow them to or a job you can see them at, and they engage in small talk that might lead you to a new quest if you overhear them. NPCs in Cyberpunk are just randomized nobodies walking around, and hardly any deeper than, say, Grand Theft Auto NPCs. Now, of course, with a setting as big and dense as Night City, it would be almost impossible to give every NPC a unique name and schedule. But for games like Elder Scrolls and Fallout, where there's multiple smaller locations, it can help make the world feel alive, or at least alive in a different way. Personally, I think Cyberpunk 2077 is the only game not made by Bethesda that perfectly fits the Bethesda RPG description. However, another game, or series as of this year, that comes very, very close to being a Bethesda RPG, but simply lacks character creation, is Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2. This series is only 2 installments in, but it's already doing an excellent job at creating a deep, immersive, historical experience. You can interact with the world and other NPCs in a ton of interesting ways, you can lose yourself to a ton of side quests and odd jobs, and you can play pretty much however you'd like. You can't buy houses or anything, but there's so many other things to do to immerse yourself in the world, including trades to learn, that this one missing mechanic isn't that big of a deal. Warhorse Studios is seriously close to making one of the best Bethesda RPGs. However, if you want to be lenient and forgive the lack of character creation, then there's room to argue that they already have. But if they ever decided they want to do battle with Elder Scrolls directly by making a fantasy game, they could absolutely do it. And I would bet that the resulting product would put pressure on Bethesda and create a real rivalry. Warhorse is just that talented. Another game that comes pretty close to being a Bethesda RPG is the 2004 classic Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It has all the relevant role-playing mechanics needed to be one, including the ability to acquire homes. The big thing it's missing, though, is the open world and unrestricted story structure. It's not too far away from being categorized as a Bethesda RPG, but its DNA is closer to that of immersive sims like Deus Ex. Now, another fantasy RPG that also comes fairly close is Dragon's Dogma. It has character creation, builds, and an open world that doesn't railroad you through the story. It's only missing the first-person perspective, and while it is possible to buy property, the game is pretty limited on tasks, odd jobs, and unique questlines with their own subplots. Dragon's Dogma's greatest strength is its combat, followed by the fascinating pawn system, so it tends to lean towards those things as much as possible without much heed to anything else. Now, this last game that I want to mention as being fairly close to being a Bethesda RPG is a strange pick. A lot of you are going to probably raise an eyebrow at me and just call me fucking crazy, but I do have reasoning for this. This game is somewhat close to being a Bethesda RPG, and this studio is very much capable of making one, but they likely never will because it's not really in their wheelhouse. I'm talking about Red Dead Redemption 2 by Rockstar Games. This pick is probably insane to anyone who hasn't played it, but hear me out. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a very, very immersive title, far more immersive than any other Rockstar game to date. It is extremely easy to lose yourself in its huge, remarkably detailed and beautiful world. In fact, it's common for people to just stop paying attention to the main story once they enter Chapter 2 and just start wandering around doing everything else. Another detail that you might have forgotten is that Red Dead Redemption 2 has an optional first-person perspective, and you can play the entire game with it, and it's actually very doable. In fact, I've done this myself. Back when the game first came out, I did my first playthrough with the normal third-person camera. Then I did a second playthrough in first person, and it was completely viable. Unfortunately, Red Dead 2 has a reputation for its hyper-linear missions that basically punish you for not following the script perfectly, so that is a mark against its structure. But thankfully, those boundaries are removed when you're between missions and just exploring the open world. The only two things completely missing from Red Dead 2 that stops it from being a Bethesda RPG is character creation and the obvious fact that it's not an RPG. But it has some small RPG-like mechanics scattered around. If Rockstar wanted to make an actual RPG, they could. They usually lean into various simulation ideas enough that they could make a full-blown RPG with just a few tweaks. In fact, they've gone deeper before. Remember in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, you can make CJ bulky by going to the gym a lot, or fat by eating a bunch of food, and it actually impacted gameplay? Rockstar is capable of making a Bethesda RPG if they really wanted to, but it's unlikely that they ever will. Now, for the sake of hopefully making things more clear, let's quickly go over a few other popular RPGs that are not Bethesda RPGs and why that's the case. First, Baldur's Gate 3. It has character creation but lacks the first-person perspective. The world is loaded with activities to do and numerous ways to interact with everything, but it's not open world and lacks any way for you to really live inside it like a normal inhabitant. It's also turn-based and not action combat, which might matter to some people. Second is Elden Ring. It has character creation, but lacks a first-person perspective. The world is vast, but isn't really populated in a way that has true role-playing in mind beyond just fighting things. And you can't really live in this world like a normal inhabitant. Not that you would want to. And since I brought up Cyberpunk, I might as well bring up The Witcher, which is not a Bethesda RPG because it's missing character creation, a first-person perspective, and the ability to live in the world in the base game. You can own property in the Blood and Wine expansion, though. Earlier in the video, I said that fans of Bethesda RPGs are actually underserved because while there are still plenty of good action RPGs out there, almost none offer the same type of experience as Oblivion or Skyrim or Fallout 3. So let's tally everything up and actually count how many Bethesda RPGs, as a category, actually exist. Let's start with Morrowind, because I think it's the first game to exemplify what Bethesda RPGs are expected to be today. From there, we have, in order, Oblivion, Fallout 3, New Vegas, Skyrim, Fallout 4, Cyberpunk 2077, and Starfield. That's only 8 games in 23 years that actually fit the description of Bethesda RPG. Only one of them is not made by Bethesda themselves, and only 3 have come out in the 13.5 years since Skyrim. This means if a person had the urge to play a Bethesda RPG released in the last 10 years, their choices are to just replay Fallout 4, Cyberpunk, or Starfield for the umpteenth time. If you want to be lenient and include Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 and 2 and Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, that's still just 11 games, and only 5 that have come out since Skyrim. And that's assuming you like Starfield too. I personally did not, so the last time I actually felt some semblance of Bethesda magic is specific parts of Fallout 4. Only 8 to 11 games in 23 years. That's how rare the Bethesda RPG actually is, and that's why so many people lose their minds for one when it pops up. Even if it's in the form of a remaster, that doesn't actually change that much. It's not just about combat or just about questing. It's about the freedom and ability to truly live in the world and be completely immersed. And yes, I do criticize most of Bethesda's games myself for being a mile wide but an inch deep, particularly their last couple titles. But to fans who are looking for this specific experience, these games are worth way more than the sum of their parts. Hopefully I made enough sense here to get my feelings across on the matter. Now, with all that said though, would I have preferred receiving Elder Scrolls 6 instead of an Oblivion Remaster? Possibly. I can't be terribly sure how much I'll enjoy Elder Scrolls 6 after Starfield, but Oblivion Remastered did remind me of why the original game sunk its claws into me all those years ago. Again, I am not a huge Bethesda fan, but I understand why people looking for that trademark Bethesda experience can't just play a totally different game and get the same thing. The Bethesda RPG feel is more specific than other people assume. This isn't necessarily my invitation to publishers to flood the market with copycat games, but maybe a few serious participants might help the genre evolve in good ways. This concludes my thoughts on what exactly is a Bethesda RPG. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.